Socialism. It's on the rise, or at least the Democrats would like it to be, but there is, folks, a Trump card. We're going to talk with producer, director, and the man who wrote the brand new film, Trump Card. Dinesh D'Souza rejoining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, which starts right now.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, once again coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, and it is such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today. Please, by all means, if you have not done so, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads, and be sure to follow our friends at the Examiner at WashingtonExaminer.com. Today, I am so excited to be joined for the second time here on Jimmy at the Crossroads by the man behind a brand new documentary that you can access today at watchtrumpcard.com. It's Dinesh D'Souza, new film called Trump Card, and he joins us here on the program. Dinesh, welcome back to the show, sir. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on.
You know, I had the opportunity to pre-screen the film, and I have to say that you're getting more and more intricate, more and more, there's so many different elements now to these films. It's your fifth one. What's your philosophy going into the creation of these documentaries?
It's to make a film that is powerful, emotionally engaging, entertaining, amusing, but in the end also inspiring and moving. I want the films to be a kind of goad to action. And but I also recognize a film is different than a book. A book is an argument with references and footnotes, but a film should be an emotionally engaging experience. And I try very hard to make my films that way.
So when it comes to the productions that you've been putting together, in this case, what you're talking about is the Rise of Socialism, which is the topic of your most recent book on the United States of Socialism, and how there's a Trump card. So give us sort of the basic overview of what your objective is with this new film.
If we look around the country, we see all kinds of craziness going on. We see these paramilitaries roaming the streets, burning things, harassing people in restaurants. We see the deep state machinations in which we seem to have corruption at the high levels of police agencies of the government. Now, all of this is the means that the left is using, but what is their goal? What is their ultimate objective? Where are they trying to take us? Well, I believe where they're trying to take us is to make us the United States of socialism. But in saying that, I want to be clear that they have devised a sort of new type of socialism. It's not the classic socialism that Marx had in mind, which essentially involved kind of a class warfare between the rich and the poor, in war, or the working class overthrows the rich and takes over, and the government controls the means of production. That's not what the left is all about today. In fact, they care less about class than about race. So their socialism, I call it identity socialism because it's a marriage of classic socialism and identity politics.
So in terms of this identity socialism, we talked about this before last time you were on the show, Dinesh D'Souza. Identity socialism is this marriage you were saying between socialism and identity politics, which of course focuses on race and ethnicity and all those kinds of things and dividing people up. But what seems so fascinating to me with this concept is that what you would think, if you want to have a successful revolution or a successful transformation, that you might want people to be unified, say, along a single class line, but instead they're dividing people along these identitarian lines. What is the purpose of that, do you believe?
Well, Marx, when he talked about the class division, justified it by saying that we need to encourage division because people in power will never relinquish power voluntarily. You have to pry it from their hands. Now, the left has gone, in a sense, they've one-upped Marx, because while Marx wanted to divide society just between the rich and the poor, the left is trying to divide society in 10 different ways. Rich against poor, yes, but also black against white, male against female, straight against gay, legal against illegal. So you can see what they're doing is they're trying to create a sort of majority coalition of oppressed victims. And if they can cobble together a 51% majority that way, they can then loot, exploit, and tyrannize over the remaining 49% of us.
Now, one thing that you talk about in the film, again, Trump Card, out today at watchtrumpcard.com. Check it out on the Salem Media platform there. You talk a little bit about the deep state as well, and that component of this whole attempt by the left to bring about more of this socialist revolution in a different way than they have in the past. You got the deep state in addition to the types of radical elements like the Antifa folks and whatnot that are going on right now in this country. Talk to us a little bit about the role that you view the deep state in terms of this new objective or new strategy.
Well, a good way to think about it is that Antifa and Black Lives Matter are the thugs on the street, and the deep state are the thugs with badges. They're both thugs. The thugs with badges are more dangerous because they have more power. And what are they doing? Well, they represent the modern version of what Orwell called Big Brother. So when Orwell used this phrase in 1984, he was thinking of this kind of invisible organ of the state that would be the enforcement arm of the state. That would enforce what? It would enforce social conformity by going after people who are perceived as critics, by going after dissidents, by suppressing free speech. And if you think about it, that's really what these police agencies of government have been doing. They've been weaponized by the left to go against political dissidents, including, in this case, the President of the United States. I mean, their chutzpah is downright unbelievable. And unless they're called to account, they will keep doing this. So the Trump presidency has sort of raised the curtain on all this, but we still haven't seen much action in terms of taking it on. And maybe that's going to be at front and center of the agenda of a Trump second term.
So one thing that I've noticed is that over the many decades since, say, 1913, so over a century now, the left has been progressively growing the size and scope and role of government through incremental means. And that has seemed to be the strategy of the mainstream Democratic Party for all this time until maybe in the last few years when we start to see more of an instant changer push, the likes of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying, no, we need to have a radical transformation of this country now. And that sort of attitude seems to be gaining steam. Talk to us a little bit about what you think in terms of a strategic shift, perhaps, between the more incremental approach of the last century and what we're now seeing.
Well, the incremental approach wasn't always all that incremental. Remember that FDR rammed through a whole bunch of programs in a very short time, and he recognized that the way to do that is against a backdrop of fear. Because if people are fearful, if they're in a crowd mentality, they're more likely to stampede. They're more likely to agree to things in the heat of the moment that they would not agree to if they gave it some thought. So the left has recognized the usefulness of the politics of fear. They recognized it in the Depression. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, they kept trying to whip up a frenzy. It was either climate change, or if it wasn't that, it was the ozone layer or nuclear winter or the earth is running out of food. One piece of nonsense on top of the other. And now, of course, coronavirus, the latest pretext, and a very good one it is, for the left to say, now we have a reason to shut the churches down and prevent you from speaking and prevent freedom of assembly. You know, even though nowhere in the Constitution does it create exemptions for a health crisis, nevertheless, they run roughshod over these constitutional rights. So that strategy continues to this day. But you're right, there's a sort of a faction of the left that believes we don't even have to stay within the bounds of the law. We can go around and knock down monuments and smash things. And a lot of this is based on the idea that they're relying on our goodwill not to do to them what they will do to us. They feel we'll knock down their monuments, but we know they're not going to knock down our monuments. We'll use the deep state against them, but even if they come to power, they're not likely to use the deep state against us. So they rely on Republicans and conservatives and Christians being the party of the nice guys, and they use our virtue as a weapon against us.
Well, and going to that point about virtue and the Republicans and this idea that the GOP are the nice guys, President Trump has a very different sort of personality. He is a fighter, and he really brings that sort of mentality and attitude to the presidency. He has throughout the last 4 years. He's bringing it in this 2020 election cycle. And you talk a little bit about in the film, as well as in your book, about how the chaos that we have seen in this moment has really brought about President Trump. And it's not the other way around, like the left would like to say, is that President Trump is sowing all of the chaos that we're seeing. Instead, it's the case that the chaos preceded President Trump.
Yeah, Trump didn't create the division. It created him. Now, there are Republicans who are baffled by Trump, and admittedly, Trump is a strange bird. I mean, he's not the type of guy. If we had met in advance and decided at the outset who's the best guy to represent, let's say, for example, the pro-life movement, I don't think any pro-life group in the country would have picked Trump. They would feel, wow, the guy doesn't have a pro-life record, etc. So it's turned out to be an unbelievable irony that this implausible man has proven to be our great champion, not just on the pro-life issue, but in fighting socialism across the board. And he's really good at it. Now, for Republicans who think that he's immoderate, that he's somehow not a moderate man, let me just suggest that he is a moderate man, but he is a moderate man in an immoderate situation. Very similar in a sense to Abraham Lincoln, who was a moderate man. But when he came to Washington, D.C. in 1861, he realized the Democrats have become gangsterized. He realized that politics was not politics as usual. He recognized that he would have to be a lot tougher if he was going to see the country through in the days and years ahead.
Once again, we're talking with Dinesh D'Souza here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. He is the purveyor of the brand new movie out today. Watch TrumpCard.com. Trump Card. Check it out. It is quite the documentary covering a lot of bases. And go into your mention of Abraham Lincoln, and you bring in some dramatization of Lincoln and highlight him in the film. And also to the point about befuddled Republicans, there is a group called the Lincoln Project, and they are trying to say that the Republican Party now has completely abandoned Abraham Lincoln and what he brought to the Republican Party well over 100 years ago. And I'm just always struck by that because I think that they don't understand it, or they're using Lincoln in a way that is simply a propagandized effort to dissuade people from the Republican Party. And so I want to ask you to sort of address that, given your citation of Lincoln a few different times in Trump Card, Dinesh D'Souza.
Well, when Abraham Lincoln began to use black troops on the Union side of the Civil War, the Confederates issued an order that any black Union soldier captured by the Confederacy would be immediately executed. They didn't execute white captives, but they were so offended by the idea of black troops fighting against them that they decided to violate all the rules of war and to do this. And when Lincoln found out about this, he issued an executive order called the Order of Retaliation, which said this: for every black Union soldier executed by the Confederacy, one Confederate captive shall be shot. Now, this is an immoderate thing to do. It's very harsh. It would go against the Geneva Convention today. Why would Lincoln do this? For the simple reason that he realized that he had to do to them what they were doing to him. Otherwise, they would never stop. And once he issued the executive order, he didn't even have to carry it out because the Confederates withdrew their order and Lincoln withdrew his in turn. The point I'm trying to make is that when people are doing lawlessness, gangsterism, going around the rules, using the deep state, you have to call them to account. You have to make them pay a price. And if you don't do that, they're going to keep doing it. If Antifa keeps getting away with burning things, they're going to keep burning them. So unless you lock these guys up, put them in handcuffs and cart them away, lock them up for long periods of time, they won't learn their lesson. Trump is determined to teach them a lesson. I think that's what distinguishes him from people like Romney and McCain and the usual kind of namby-pamby Republican that we've been used to over the last couple of decades.
Let's talk a little bit more about the nature of the Democratic Party right now, Dinesh D'Souza. I mean, you've got Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, Kamala Harris as his vice presidential pick. They want to certainly bring about much more left-wing ideology than President Trump. But if you talk to some folks who are on the far left, they will say, I don't really think that Biden or Harris really qualify as one of us. I'm always curious about this because I certainly noticed that even though Biden's record is not something in the past where he has been as far left as some of his other cohorts in the Democratic Party, it does seem that this ideology of big government has gone even beyond anything that the Democratic Party had represented in the past, and that Joe Biden is now representative of a shift. So what do you make of where things are at on the left right now?
Well, the far left doesn't fully trust Biden because of his record. He has been more centrist in the past, but he's not that centrist now. Usually, when someone gets the Democratic nomination, they move to the center. Biden has been moving left. He's changed his position on a whole bunch of issues. He used to be, for example, for the Hyde Amendment, banning federal funding for abortion. Now he's for it. He was against the sort of radical free college proposals that came out of people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Now he's for them. He hasn't even spoken out strongly enough, in my view, against a lot of this chaos and violence. So he appears to think, and Kamala Harris certainly does, that violence itself is a sort of mechanism for social change, a kind of prod to society to move faster. And so these are the sort of thugs, or at least enablers of thugs, that are at the very top ranks of the Democratic Party, and they're surrounded by people even more thuggish than they are. So this is a scary prospect. We run the prospect of having a sort of Democratic equivalent of the Corleone family running America.
Once again, Dinesh D'Souza, our guest. Check out his new film, Trump Card. Watch TrumpCard.com, the Salem media platform. So one thing that I've noticed, and I'm so glad you brought this up in the documentary and you explore in some depth a discussion of the Scandinavian countries versus what we're seeing, say, in the last couple of decades in Venezuela, and how the left consistently cites the Scandinavian countries, AOC, Bernie Sanders, saying, hey, we need to look at Sweden and Denmark and Norway as the prime examples of where socialism works, as opposed to Venezuela. Why did you highlight this distinction, and what is it about Venezuela as an example that so differs from the Scandinavian countries in terms of actual socialism?
The Scandinavian countries don't have identity socialism, and they don't have socialism in any form that would be recognizable in America today. Have you ever seen Scandinavians going around denouncing their own rich people? They never do. They treat them as all in the same boat. Second of all, they don't foment race divisions in society. They don't do that. In fact, there's only one Scandinavian country, Sweden, where you even have something resembling real ethnic and racial diversity. Most of the other Scandinavian countries are very homogenous. In that sense, they cannot provide a model for America. The Scandinavian countries don't only tax the rich, they tax the middle class and they tax the poor. Their so-called VAT tax, which is the value added or consumer tax, falls more heavily on the poor than on the middle class and on the rich. So the Scandinavians don't rob Peter to pay Paul in the expectation of getting Paul's vote, which is the essence of the strategy of the Democratic Party in America. But if you now turn to Venezuela, my wife is Venezuelan, and she knows Venezuela all that well. I've come to know it a lot better. The parallels between Venezuelan socialism and the American Democratic left are chilling and many. The Venezuelans confiscated guns right before the socialist government began to tyrannize over the citizens. The Venezuelans do demonize the rich. They knock down Columbus statues in Venezuela. By the way, they don't knock down Columbus statues in Stockholm or in Norway. They don't have any beef with Columbus. Their only objection to Columbus was that he wasn't Norwegian. Going back to Venezuela, the Chavistas, the socialists, live high on the hog, while everybody else is reduced to misery. The Venezuelans go after oil. Even though they're an oil-rich country, they have shut down, virtually paralyzed their own oil industry, and now you have gas lines and importations of oil in a country that has perhaps more oil than any other country in the world, including Saudi Arabia. So Venezuela is a basket case of socialism. I think if the Democratic left took over here and began to move us, it would be in the Venezuelan, not in the Scandinavian direction.
One of the things you point out in the movie that I have observed quite a bit on this program and elsewhere, Dinesh D'Souza, has been this idea from the Democrats of giving free stuff to people, that is the mentality when we're talking about free college, free healthcare, the list goes on. One of the things that this underscores more than anything, it seems, is that there is a sense of legal plunder that to use Bastiat's term, Frederick Bastiat, legal plunder, that they think, hey, we can take money from this one group, in this case, the rich, and then redistribute it to these other groups in order to, as you were alluding to just a moment ago, securing the votes of those other groups. It seems to be a fairly out-of-step philosophy from what the founding of this country was, to put it mildly.
It's the very opposite. America is about wealth creation. It's about entrepreneurship. It's about building things. Now, you can see how Trump is in that tradition. Most of his life, he's been a builder. In that sense, Trump is the anti-socialist, not only in politics, but also in the fact that he's been the classic capitalist for most of his career. Now, turning to the techniques of the socialists, they are about plunder, about ripping you off, and they're also about making you feel good about being a thief. Let me explain it this way: if someone were to say, "Hey, Jimmy, why don't you go to your neighbor's house, open his refrigerator and eat his food, look around his house and take all the stuff that you see that you like and bring it over to your house?" You'd be like, "Well, I can't do that. That would make me into a thief. And if I did do that, I would feel horrible about myself because my conscience would gnaw at me." But now imagine that a socialist, AOC, comes to you and goes, "Hey, Jimmy, listen, all the stuff that is in your neighbor's house actually belongs to you. If your neighbor didn't steal it from you directly, his ancestors stole it from your ancestors. So you are entitled to go get his stuff. Don't feel bad about doing it because it truly is your stuff." Well, you're going to be like, "Wow, this is fantastic. Who knew? Let me get over there right away." And so what happens here is that the socialist then even says, "Jimmy, you don't even have to do that. Listen, we'll go and grab his stuff. We will confiscate it by force. Obviously, we'll keep some of it for ourselves and we'll give the rest of it to you." So you see here how socialism is a rip-off scheme that ultimately turns ordinary people into thieves.
Once again, we're talking to Dinesh D'Souza, the producer, writer, and director of the brand new documentary Trump Card. You can go onto the Salem Media platform, watchtrumpcard.com. Check it out now. I strongly recommend it, having watched the film. And I just want to ask a couple final questions, and we will play a quick preview of the documentary from the trailer that you put out for Trump Card, Dinesh D'Souza. But right now we are amidst the critical fight for the United States Supreme Court. You make mention of this in your documentary without the current fight being in mind because the film was already completed. So talk to us just for a moment about the critical nature of the Supreme Court battle that we're fighting right now as far as the future of American liberty and this war against socialism.
Well, the Supreme Court has become the center of many of these fraught cultural issues like abortion. And this has been the doing of the left, because prior to Roe versus Wade, abortion was decided at the state level. But it's been centralized by the left in the court, and that's part of what makes these battles so fractious. The bottom line of it is the Republicans now have a chance to control the court. And by the way, for the first time, it's really weird because Republicans have nominated a majority of justices, but have still not controlled the court because Republican nominees have proven to be unreliable. Sandra Day O'Connor, David Souter, Anthony Kennedy, even the Chief Justice Roberts. So I think that with Amy Coney Barrett, we have somebody really solid that I hope will give us a sort of lasting majority on the court.
Dinesh D'Souza joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Real quickly, I want to play some of the trailer for the brand new film Trump Card and ask one final question of you, Dinesh D'Souza, producer, writer, and director of this, his fifth film.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of rain.
A house divided against itself cannot stand.
We are in a cold civil war. I see a threat to the very reason I came to America.
America was never great! America was never great!
Are we losing our country?
We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression.
Are we becoming the United States of socialism? Who's behind it?
Our country should be more fearful of white man.
They control the black community, they control the black vote.
The president spoke tonight as if
they don't want to hear the truth, the media, and I almost feel like they gloat when there's a mass shooting.
My hands are being put in handcuffs, my ankles are shacked.
Period of 18 months, I went through 23 different audits or investigations.
29 FBI agents with assault weapons.
Why it's evil.
Joe Biden offshored the corruption. He has become incredibly soft in his criticism of China.
The growth of China is overwhelmingly in our interest.
It is directly linked to the fact that his son was doing multiple deals with the Chinese government.
What is the fundamentalist and jihadi agenda for America?
The future of America has to be Muslim.
What you're saying is that there is serious Middle Eastern and specifically radical Islamic intervention into U.S. politics.
Exactly, and I think it's more dangerous than the so-called Russian collusion.
They want to beat us into submission.
And before I could even catch my footing, then all the hits kept coming.
They want to make us into worms.
How many fingers am I holding up, Winston?
4.
Who will stop them?
That America will never be a socialist country.
A final question for you, Dinesh D'Souza, and I encourage folks to check out the film now at watchtrumpcard.com. With the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of things seem to have changed, and we saw the evolution of Black Lives Matter and all the protests and chaos that have gone about across the country. I'm sure that you had some film in mind earlier in the year, and that things may have changed in terms of production, in terms of some of the things that you wanted to focus on. Talk to us a little bit about how your plans for the movie evolved over time, given those circumstances.
Well, a film is always a kind of a work in process, and we treat the documentary not based upon a sort of pre-existing script. We sketch out ideas, and then as things develop, we incorporate them. I like the film to have the feel of being ripped right out of the headlines, and I'm very proud to say this film, even though it was completed a few weeks ago, has all that freshness of having come right out of current events. So watchtrumpcard.com is the place to go for it, and you're going to see it's a very exciting experience.
And remember, what we're seeing happen right now, as you pointed out, is the means, not the ends that we're looking towards, right?
That's right.
All right, Dinesh D'Souza, writer, director, producer of the brand new film Trump Card. Thanks so much for rejoining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads today.
My pleasure.
Radical big government ideology that devalues private property rights, that devalues individual liberty, and prioritizes the strength and power of the all-knowing, all-powerful government in order to accomplish their ends. Now, it is important to understand what's going on. It's also important to understand what to do about it. And he does provide some tidbits of information in that regard, some suggestions for action when it comes to the documentary and its close. Strongly recommend it. Be sure to check out Trump Card and be aware and pay attention to what's going on and be informed on how to respond to it. Well, that is it for us today here on this edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you once again in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Tomorrow, Judge Jeanine Pirro of the Fox News Channel joins us to talk about her brand new book. Be sure to join us then. For now, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. My thanks to Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire, to you for joining us, watching the program today, to Dinesh D'Souza, our guest, our partners at the Washington Examiner, and to Americans for keeping up the fortitude amidst all the chaos. Thank you, and may God bless America.